In this video, we will do a seated vinyasa with the movement of the pelvis in the three planes, in the three different planes. And we will put our legs in different configurations, so different seated postures. And why we do this is because when the legs are in different configurations, so we'll go from cross-legged to Baddha Konasana, to Z posture, to Janu-Sirsasana, to Garudasana, to various poses, the relationship of the legs, the pelvis, and the spine slightly changes. And by doing the same movements, flexion, extension, side bend, and twist, with the legs in these various configurations, it gives the nervous system similar information, but from slightly different angles. And the more different angles the nervous system gets that information from, then the more it can integrate that information in a way that could possibly change the relationship of those body parts and how they are aligned, how they're configured, how they move in relationship to each other. So we want to give the brain as much new information as possible so that it can reorganize, hopefully in a way that gives you more steadiness, some more flexibility, and more intelligence in your movement. So you will need, if you've got a ball, this is an 11-centimeter ball. And the reason I like the 11-centimeter ball is that it fits so perfectly into the circle of the pelvis that is formed by the posterior arch here and the anterior arch here, and the bowl of the bony bowl of the pelvis. And it just fits right nicely in there. And it gives me a really good visual and almost a visceral or a kinesthetic sense of that ball embedded deeply in my pelvis so that I can initiate movement from the ball. But don't worry, if you don't have a ball, you can still use your mudra, your mandala mudra. Right hand on left and thumbs forming a circle. So the circle is the symbol of wholeness, and you can imagine that this is actually the circles inside your bony pelvis, and you can initiate movement from there. You might also need a bolster. If you know that sitting in Z posture or Garudasana legs might not be that accessible for you, then it's a lot easier on a bolster. So if you don't have bolster, if you think you'll need it, and if you want to get a ball, then you might want to pause the video and go get that. So as usual, we will start in baseline, taking a baseline of information so that you know where you're starting, and then you go back to it at the end and you know what's changed. So two baseline postures here. First is lying flat on the floor, just very briefly. And noticing how your body is lying on the floor. How comfortable is it? What's your outline? And of course, we're very curious about what's happening with the back of the pelvis and the lumbar curve, how the sacrum is resting on the floor. Is there symmetry? Is it different? How is the rest of your body lying on the floor? What's pressing heavily, what's pressing lightly, what's not pressing at all. And then rolling onto your side and coming up to sitting. And the second baseline that we'll take is Janu-Sirsasana, so seated forward bend. So first in Dandasana, getting a sense of, how does this feel in Dandasana? What's my level of ease? Do I feel like I'm rolling back on my sitting bones? And then coming into just a really easy forward bend dynamically. So going back and forth a few times. And noticing the range of motion that you've got comfortably with ease. What does that feel like? Where do you feel it? Is there any sense of stress when you do it? And then letting that go. And the first position that we'll start with is cross-legged with the right leg on top, either sitting in front or actually on top of the left leg. And then taking your ball or forming the mudra. And taking your mind into the bowl of your pelvis, into the circles and the arches. And doing a few hara breaths. So as you inhale, imagine that your inhalation is pressing out against the inner surfaces of the ilia, the deep sides of the ilia, the inner surface of the pubic bone and the sacrum. Where you put your mind matters. And when you've got your mind there, then it's easier for you to at least imagine initiating movement from there. So keeping up with this hara breath throughout this practice can be very helpful. So holding the ball or holding the mudra at the level of where it would actually be in your pelvis, in your actual pelvis, and starting first with flexion and extension movement in the sagittal plane. So rolling the ball backward and rolling the ball forward and letting that take your pelvis with it. So each movement may be 4 or 5 times. Good. And we won't do side bend and twist on both sides because that would take a really long time. You can do it yourself if you're practicing this vinyasa. But I'm going to do it just on one side, both side bend and twist on one side, according to which leg is fixed and which leg is more mobile. So in this posture with the right leg on top, we'll do a left side bend. So rolling the ball to the left, letting the pelvis go with it. And of course, the spine goes with the pelvis. Rolling it to the left and then rolling it to come back to neutral. And then twist. So now rolling to the left, rolling back. Rolling to the left, rolling back. And initiating that movement from deep inside. And you may notice that doing that is somewhat different than what your usual would be. And let's just see what that would be like. So without the ball, if I asked you to flex and extend your spine, where would you move from? Just a few times. And then a side bend. Where would you move from? Most people would be initiating from the shoulders, from the spine, maybe from the head, and then a twist. Where's your habit of movement? Good. Okay. And then taking the ball again, and now changing the orientation of the legs into Baddha Konasana, into butterfly. And if any of these postures aren't comfortable for you without something underneath your pelvis, then please put a folded blanket or two or a block, whatever you need to be comfortable, so that you can be sitting on your sitting bones and not rolled back. Okay, so first movement, sagittal plane, flexion, extension, initiating from deep inside. Hara breath. The Hara breath helps you to keep your attention there. Okay, and here we will go to both sides. So first side bending, rolling the ball one way and then the other way. And letting that go. And now twist, twirling the ball so that it moves the pelvis, which then moves the spine. And as the pelvis is twisting to the left, I'm creating more space in the right hip socket. Same thing when I go the other way. Hara breath. Okay, letting that go. The third position is Garudasana, eagle pose. So with the right leg on top. And here's where, if it's not comfortable for you to sit this way, there's various adaptations. You can either move the knees apart. You can bring the bolster into the picture so that it's easier for you to get the knees closer together. So whatever is most comfortable for you. Okay, so let's move that. Okay, so ball in position, Hara breath. First starting with a few Hara breaths just to get your awareness back into that pelvic bowl. And then rolling the ball forward and rolling the ball backward. Extension and flexion. And then side bend right, because I've got my left leg fixed. So I'm opening up the hip socket. And doing each movement with your breath, whichever makes most sense to you. Does it make more sense to do your Hara inhalation as you move or the exhalation? Doesn't matter. And then twirling to the right, twirling the ball to the right or twirling the mudra to the right, and the twist. So again, the left leg is fixed. So I'm moving the pelvis away from that fixed leg and creating an opening in the left hip socket. Okay, so letting that go. So now taking the top right leg back into Z pose and arranging your body into Z pose. And here again, for some people, it may be easier to be sitting on something when you do this. So now the configuration of my leg is my right leg is in internal rotation, my left leg is in external rotation. So starting with flexion and extension, and noticing you may be able to feel the different movements of the hip sockets with one leg in internal and the other in external rotation. And then I'm going to side bend right because this is the leg that's back. And I want to, as I do that, get a little bit of inferior glide. So rolling the ball to the right and rolling it upright. And noticing throughout this vinyasa, any tendency you might have to move from your habitual place. So not from your pelvic basket, your pelvic bowl. Good. Okay, and then the twist, since we're already partly moving that way to the left, is to the left. Good. And then take that right leg from behind you, take it in front, straight for Janusirsasana, and take your left foot and put it anywhere along the right inner leg that's comfortable for you, depending on your knee, depending on just what's comfortable. So again, a little bit of activation in the straight leg so that your toes are pointing upward, that your leg's not all flopped out. And starting in the sagittal plane with flexion and extension. And then right side bend, because we want to get more space in the left hip socket. Remembering your Hara breath. I find that the Hara breath just takes me immediately into a more grounded and centered place. And then the twist in the transverse plane will be over the straight leg. So rolling the ball so that it moves the left side of the pelvis forward, the right side of the pelvis back. And then changing legs. So now the left leg is going to be straight, the right leg will be bent. This side may be different. So experiment and see where is the leg most comfortable. Do I need something under my knees to support? We all have different levels of flexibility and of ease. And in order for repatterning to work, we want your body to be in maximum comfort. Yeah. So flexion and extension, little activation in the straight leg. Then we want to do a left side bend away from the bent knee. And a left twist over the straight leg. So the right side of the pelvis moves forward, the left side moves back. Which also, by the way, keeps the sacroiliac joints snug and in congruence. Good. Okay, now move the left leg back into, and the right leg forward into Z pose. You may again need something to sit on. You may need to change the configuration of your knees a little to make them more comfortable. And then flexion and extension. Hara breath. How does it feel different when you move from deep inside, from your wholeness? Yeah. The sphere, the symbol of wholeness. Moving, you can think of this as moving from your wholeness. Okay, then left side bend over the back leg. And when you're moving from your pelvic circle like this, the movement may not be as glorious. You may not go as far into side bend as you think you could, but we're not so interested in that. We're interested in, can you move from this place? And how does that change the configuration of your legs, your pelvis, and your spine? So the twist here will be a right twist because you're already going that way. Rotating the ball to the right. So the right side of the pelvis moves back, the left one moves forward. Good. And then moving the left leg on top into Garudasana, eagle pose. Starting with flexion and extension. Rolling the ball backward, rolling the ball forward inside the bowl, the bony bowl of the pelvis, so that the pelvis is carried with it. Hara breath. And then left side bend. So we get an opening in the right hip socket. And I should say that if any of these positions doesn't work for you, then, and you can't find a way with props to do it comfortably, then it might not be for you. Yeah, or you can figure out a way to do it in a chair instead. And then left twist. Still doing the hara breath. And then the last posture, cross-legged, now with the left leg on top, or sitting just in front, resting just in front. Flexion and extension. Then right side bend. And right twist. And then let that go. Put the ball away. Take a few more hara breaths, maybe with your eyes closed. Noticing if it's any easier for you to place your awareness there now, after doing all of that. And then retesting your baseline, first in Dandasana and forward bend, Paschimottanasana. First in Dandasana. Notice if it's any easier for you to sit. Are you any more forward on your sitting bones than you were to start? And then an easy forward bend, back and forth a few times. Noticing, has that changed? Is it any, are you going, do you have more range of motion, or is it any easier or less discomfort? So noticing that. So this vinyasa is just made up. You can do any seated poses that you want. You can, in order to play with these 3 pelvic movements. Yeah. And to notice the different configuration of the legs, the pelvis, and the spine, and knowing that you're giving the brain, the nervous system, more information so that it can take it all in and maybe reorganize how you are doing your movements in a more habitual way. Now, we've done lots of movement, lots of range of motion. So if you feel at all like that's been too much, then after this video ends, please do either some dynamic bridge poses or a little bit of the pelvic reset, and that will help to stabilize your pelvis, because we're always working with the balance between flexibility and stability, and we've done a lot of flexibility now, and for some of you that may be too much, so you want to bring yourself back into balance. So that's it for this practice.